My workbench is still out in the garage. I built it myself 30 years ago from 2x4s and a sheet of oak I found at an estate sale. It still smells like sawdust and linseed oil if you get close enough. I know because I was back in that garage last spring, standing in front of it, and my daughter-in-law asked me if I wanted to take it with me. I told her no. Some things you leave where they belong. My name is Gerald. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years building custom cabinetry in Wheaton, Illinois. Custom kitchens, built-in bookshelves, mudroom benches for houses that cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I was good at it. My hands knew wood the way some men know music. My wife, Diane, used to say I was the only man she'd ever met who could look at a piece of lumber and already see what it wanted to become. She said a lot of things. Most of them I used to believe. We met when I was 31 and she was 28. She had a son from a previous relationship. Marcus, 9 years old at the time, quiet kid with his mother's eyes and a habit of watching you before he decided whether to trust you. I didn't try to be his father. I tried to be his friend, and I think for a while I was. I taught him how to use a level, showed him how to read the grain of wood before you cut. He was good with his hands, too, back then. We got married in 1993 in a small ceremony at a church outside Naperville. 22 people. Diane wore ivory. I wore the only suit I owned that fit properly. Her mother cried. My father shook my hand and said, "You take care of her now." I told him I would. I kept that promise for 28 years. Marcus grew up in our house. I paid for his school clothes, his baseball cleats, his first car, a used Honda Civic that needed a new alternator before he even drove it off the seller's lot. I fixed it myself. He sat in the garage and watched me work, and when it started, he looked at me with something I can only describe as respect. That was a long time ago. He turned 41 3 years before everything fell apart. I don't know exactly when Marcus started changing. Maybe he always had that part in him and I just hadn't seen it. Or maybe something happened in his 30s. A bad business deal, a relationship that went wrong, that soured him in ways that never fully healed. By the time he was in his late 30s, he'd gone through 2 failed businesses and a divorce, and he had a way of looking at me across the dinner table that I couldn't quite name. Not hatred. Something colder than that. Like he was calculating something. He moved back in with us in 2018. Diane asked me first. She did ask. I'll give her that. And I said yes because what was I going to say? He was her son. He was in trouble. You don't close the door on family. The first 6 months were fine. He kept to himself, looked for work, ate dinner with us on Sundays. I thought maybe we'd found a rhythm. Then he started spending more time alone with Diane. I'd come home from a job site, mud on my boots, sawdust on my shirt, and they'd be in the kitchen together, talking in low voices that stopped when I walked in. Diane would smile and say dinner was almost ready, and Marcus would look at his phone. Nothing I could point to, nothing I could name, just a shift in the air, the way a room feels different when a conversation has just ended. In the spring of 2019, Diane told me that Marcus needed more space. We were in the bedroom. She was at her vanity, taking off her earrings. She said it the way you'd mention a change in the weather. Casual, already decided. She said Marcus felt uncomfortable in the house with both of us there. She said he'd been struggling with his mental health, which may have been true, I had no way of knowing, and that his therapist had suggested a more stable, low-stress environment. I asked what that meant. She set down her earring and looked at me in the mirror. "It means it might be better if you stayed somewhere else for a little while," she said, "just until Marcus gets back on his feet." I sat down on the edge of the bed. I remember the bedspread was blue. Diane had picked it out the winter before, a quilted thing from a department store in Oak Brook. I remember staring at it for what felt like a long time. "This is my house," I said. "It's our house," she said, "and I'm asking you as my husband to do this for my son. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I've had years to think about it, and I still don't fully understand it. I didn't argue. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't say the things I should have said. I was 60 years old, and I'd been married to this woman for 28 years, and something in me went very quiet, the way a house goes quiet in winter, and I just nodded. I packed a bag that night, 2 changes of clothes, my shaving kit, my reading glasses, the John Grisham novel I'd been working through for 2 weeks. I went to stay at a Red Roof Inn off Route 38, $59 a night. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. There was a laminated card on the dresser listing checkout procedures. I sat on the edge of the bed. This one had a green bedspread, and I called my brother Ray in Rockford, and when he answered, I tried to explain what had happened, and I couldn't get through the whole thing without my voice breaking. Ray said, "Gerald, you need to call a lawyer first thing tomorrow." I told him I would. It took me 11 days. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking. The same things people would eventually say to me once I started telling this story. Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you go home? I don't have a clean answer. The closest I can get is this. When you've spent 28 years in a life with someone, when you have built your routines and your mornings and your quiet evenings around a single other person, being pushed out of that doesn't feel like a clear injustice at first. It feels like a mistake. Like something that can still be fixed if you just wait a little longer, stay a little quieter, give her a little more time to come to her senses. I waited. She did not come to her senses. On the 12th day, I called a family law attorney in Wheaton named Patricia Osey. She had an opening at 4 o'clock. I drove to her office in my work truck with my hands steady on the wheel, and I sat across from her and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked me 3 questions. Was my name on the mortgage? Were there joint bank accounts? Did we have a prenuptial agreement? Yes, no. She said, "Okay, you have more leverage than you think." That was the first good thing anyone had said to me in nearly 2 weeks. The next morning, I went to our bank. My name was still on everything, technically, and I moved half of the balance in our joint checking account into a new individual account. Not vindictive, just what Patricia had advised. "Protect yourself now," she said, "before things get complicated." Then I drove home. Marcus's car was in the driveway. I parked behind it, walked to the front door, and let myself in with my key. He came out of the kitchen and stopped when he saw me. He was taller than me by 2 inches, and he'd put on weight since moving back in. He was wearing a flannel shirt I didn't recognize. "Diane's not here," he said. "I know," I said. "I didn't come to see Diane." I went into my office off the hallway, and I took my files, tax records, property documents, the folder with our insurance policies, and I put them in a box. I took the small fireproof safe from the closet shelf. I took the photograph from my desk, the one of me and Diane from our trip to Gatlinburg in 2004, standing in front of a waterfall, both of us squinting in the sun and grinning like we didn't have a worry in the world. Marcus watched me from the doorway the whole time, didn't say a word. When I picked up the box and turned to leave, he said, "This was always going to happen, you know." I looked at him. "She was always going to choose me," he said. Not angry, just stating a fact, the way you'd read something off a receipt. I carried my box out to the truck. The divorce proceedings took 14 months. I won't walk you through all of it. The mediations, the motions, the Saturdays spent in Patricia's conference room reviewing documents. But I'll tell you the parts that mattered. The house was in both our names. I had contributed significantly more to the mortgage over the course of our marriage, and Patricia was able to document that clearly. In the end, I agreed to let Diane keep the house in exchange for a cash settlement that gave me enough to start over. We split the retirement accounts. She kept the furniture. I kept my tools, my truck, and a check that I deposited the same afternoon I signed the papers. Diane cried in the mediator's office. I watched her and felt something I still don't have a name for. Not satisfaction, not grief, just a kind of enormous tiredness, the way you feel at the end of a very long job when all that's left is the cleanup. Marcus was not present. He was living in the house by then, in the guest room that had been my office, and Diane was buying his groceries, and I imagined she told herself this was love. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Carroll Stream, 20 minutes from my old shop. I kept working. There is no better cure for a broken life than a job that requires your full attention, and cabinet making requires all of you. Your eyes, your hands, your judgment, the quiet part of your mind that knows when something is not yet right. I worked 50-hour weeks. I took on contracts I'd previously turned down because they were too large or too far or too complicated. In the second year, I hired an assistant, a 24-year-old named Dylan, who'd been a carpenter's apprentice and needed someone to teach him the rest. He called me Mr. Gerald for the first 3 months until I told him to stop. He's still with me now. In the third year, I incorporated Gerald R. Cabinetry and Custom Millwork, LLC. It sounds more impressive than it was at first. Just me, Dylan, and a woman named Beverly who handled the books 3 days a week. But the jobs kept coming, and by the end of year 3, we had 4 employees and a waiting list. I moved into a house in Glen Ellen, a 1940s craftsman bungalow with original woodwork that someone had painted over in the 1980s. I spent my first winter there stripping all of it back to the raw wood, room by room, nights and weekends, just me and the heat gun and whatever was on the radio. It was the most peaceful thing I'd done in years. My brother Ray came to visit in the spring of that year. He stood in my living room and looked at the restored crown molding and the refinished floors, and he shook his head slowly. "Gerald," he said, "you're going to be all right." I already knew that, but it was good to hear someone say it. In the 4th year, a kitchen design magazine in Chicago ran a small feature on our work, a project we'd done for a couple in Hinsdale, custom walnut cabinetry with hand-cut dovetail joints, the kind of work that takes time and patience and a refusal to cut corners. They photographed the kitchen for 2 hours, and the piece ran 3 pages. My full name was in the caption beneath the main photo. That was in February. In March, I got a voicemail I almost deleted. The number was Diane's. I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 years, not since the day we signed the divorce papers. I stood in my kitchen and played the message twice. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered, thinner somehow, like something had been taken out of it. She said she'd seen the magazine. She said she'd recognized my work before she recognized my name. That was the part that hit me, actually, that she still knew my work that well after all this time. She said she wanted to talk. She said things had changed. She said Marcus had, and here her voice went very careful, that Marcus had made some decisions that affected her, and she was in a difficult position, and she thought maybe we could have coffee and just talk. She said she was sorry. She said it quickly, at the end, almost like she was hoping I might not catch it, but I caught it. I sat down at my kitchen table. The table is one I built myself, white oak, breadboard ends, a finish that took 3 coats to get exactly right. I sat at that table for a long time. Then I called Patricia. Not because I needed legal advice. I just needed to talk to someone who'd seen the whole thing from the beginning, who knew what those 14 months had cost. Patricia listened, and then she said something I've thought about many times since. She said, "You don't owe her anything, Gerald, but you also get to decide who you want to be on the other side of this." I called Diane back the next morning. We met at a diner in Lombard. Her suggestion, neutral ground. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth, and when I walked in, she looked up and something crossed her face that I can only describe as relief and shame arriving at the same time. She looked older. We both did. That's not a criticism, it's just time. I ordered coffee. She ordered tea and then didn't drink it. She told me what had happened. Marcus had found a girlfriend, a woman with a house of her own, and over the course of the last year he had quietly, steadily transferred his attention to that new situation and away from Diane. He had stopped paying the token rent she'd asked him for. He'd borrowed money, twice, and not repaid it. And 3 months ago, he had moved out with 2 days' notice, taking with him several items from the house that had been Diane's, including a piece of jewelry her own mother had left her. She told me this without dramatics, just facts laid out on the table. "I made him into someone who knew he could take from the people who loved him," she said. "I did that, and then he did it to me. I didn't say anything. I don't expect you to forgive me," she said. "I know what I asked you to do. I know what it cost you." The diner was warm. Someone 2 booths over was laughing at something. Outside the window, a couple walked past with a dog on a red leash. "I already have forgiven you," I said. "Not for you, for me, a long time ago." She nodded. She pressed her lips together. "How's the business?" she said finally, because neither of us knew what else to say. "Good," I said. "It's really good." "I saw the magazine," she said. "The kitchen was beautiful." "Walnut," I said. "You have to let Walnut breathe. A lot of guys rush it." She almost smiled at that. We finished our coffees, or I finished mine and she let hers go cold, and we said goodbye in the parking lot. I drove home with the windows down even though it was only 50 degrees, because I needed the air and the noise and the feeling of moving forward. I have not spoken to Marcus. I don't intend to. This is not anger. I've set anger down somewhere along the way, left it in a diner booth in Lombard or maybe in a Red Roof Inn in Geneva. I'm not sure. It's just that some bridges, once they're gone, you don't rebuild them. Some wood is too damaged to work with. You learn to recognize that after enough years at the bench. I turned 63 last October. Dylan and Beverly and my 4 guys threw me a small party in the shop after hours, and someone had ordered a cake with a wood grain design on the frosting, which made me laugh more than anything has in a long time. My brother Ray drove down from Rockford. My daughter from a previous relationship, my own from before Diane, a whole other story, flew in from Portland and stayed for the weekend. The business is doing well. We're booked through next spring. There is a craftsman bungalow in Elmhurst whose owners want every window and door cased in white oak, and I've already started milling the pieces, already hearing in the back of my mind what they want to become. My workbench is still in that garage on Diane Street, in the house that used to be mine. I think about it sometimes. I think about the way I built it, the careful joinery, the way I made sure the top was dead flat before I ever set a tool on it, the way I signed my initials on the underside where no one would ever see them. Some things you make to last. Some things you leave where they belong. And some things, the best things, you carry with you without even realizing it, in your hands, in your patience, in the quiet knowledge that you can still look at something raw and unfinished and already see what it wants to become. That's enough. For me, that's more than enough.